These stories are 100% true and were shared with me by my friends and family over the years. I have grown up in eastern Kentucky, spending several years here since the age of 1. My whole family has lived in the rural Appalachian region their entire lives, although many have since moved to smaller towns scattered throughout the area. The following stories take place in a rural area nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains. This area, though considered a county with a name, is more like a collection of deep ridges and mountain folk. During the early days of settlers, these mountains were home to the Cherokee Indians. Many cemeteries in the area contain around 30 to 40 graves of Native Americans marked with stones and rocks rather than traditional burial markers. In the 1800s, George Washington's aide-de-camp named Grayson was granted a 70,000-acre piece of land, which is now where my town is located. In the 1970s, my mom, her aunt, and her small cousins were driving on an empty road just outside of town when they reached the top of a hill where an abandoned farmhouse stood. They stopped the car in its tracks and saw a massive, hovering, saucer-shaped craft above the house. Terrified, my mother and her aunt sped away, scared that the craft would follow them down the mountain back to town. When they looked in the rearview mirror, they saw the craft tailing them at high speed. It chased them for over a mile until they reached the edge of the county road leading back into town, where it finally vanished. My mother has shared this story countless times, and many believe her as they too have seen strange lights in the sky in and around various community areas. She even drew me a picture of the spacecraft, which I still have. It was gray, metallic looking, with red lights on the edges and bottom and a few green ones on the side. The second story takes place when my mother was a child, but old enough to understand something was happening. One night, a man known to her family barged into their house, scared out of his wits. He lived in a deep cabin within the woods, some miles away, and reported experiencing poltergeist activity, orbs, and other paranormal phenomena. He claimed a demon tormented him all night, throwing pots, pans, glasses, and even furniture at him. Despite his attempts to rebuke it in the name of Jesus Christ, the activity intensified. He eventually fled his home, walking through the woods and rural roads for hours until he reached my grandmother's house, all while hearing footsteps trailing him in the woods. Fast forward to the 90s. A white brick house sat atop a small hill in town, where a man and his wife had lived for several years. One day, while the woman was at work, the man called her to say something was wrong with the gas in the house. He went to the basement, and when he lit a match, the house exploded, sending rubble everywhere. The man's wife, who saw the explosion from her workplace, rushed home to find the house gone, reduced to its foundation. Since then, it has become local legend that the man's spirit haunts the land. A TV show akin to Ghost Hunters even filmed an episode there due to the experiences reported by its inhabitants, from rattling pots and pans to actual manifestations inside the residence. In another story, my dad's family lives up a series of ridges and hollers in a place we'll call Webb, Kentucky. My dad's lineage has lived there since the 1800s. The following story takes place at my uncle's house, a 2-story log cabin built by an old one-armed Irishman. My uncle died in 2010 of a massive heart attack on his porch, and since then the house has mostly sat empty, except for occasional stays by my aunt. The house has a history of paranormal activity, with disembodied footsteps, voices, and apparitions reported over the years. In the late 90s or early 2000s, my uncle, who was an avid raccoon hunter, was chased out of the woods by something he described as walking bipedally. His hunting dogs, usually fearless, were frightened and wouldn't chase whatever it was. He barely made it home, recounting his harrowing experience to my family. Another tale involves my dad's eldest brother, who moved back to the mountains after being diagnosed with incurable lung cancer in 2016. He found a suitable house on a steep hill surrounded by dense woods, but it had an eerie vibe. The house had been abandoned in a hurry with belongings left behind and a massive burn pile in the backyard. In the front yard was a grave of a stillborn infant from the early 70s. Paranormal activity soon plagued the house, with footsteps, doors opening and closing by themselves, and apparitions tormenting my uncle until his death in 2017. Afterward, the family blessed the property in an attempt to banish the dark entities. My father often stayed with my grandmother after my uncle's passing to calm her nerves due to her sundowner syndrome. One night, my dad heard a commotion outside and went to investigate, armed with a shotgun and flashlight. He saw a large, tall creature with red eyes reflecting the flashlight's beam, watching him as it walked back into the woods. Shaken, he recounted the experience to my mother, who later found a local legend about the devil himself haunting the area. One day, my father and I visited a rural county cemetery deep in the mountains where our family is buried. We noticed a large, bare footprint, much larger than my own, with a perfectly round big toe and a sharply curved arch. I later told my aunt, who related that my uncle had felt watched and creeped out when visiting the same cemetery years prior. Another story happened when my grandmother died in late 2018. My aunt and uncle moved into her trailer temporarily and reported paranormal activity, hearing footsteps and voices. On the night they moved out, every light source they had went out and they felt followed inside the trailer. They heard footsteps even after leaving, and while the trailer was later sold and renovated, no further activity was reported. One evening, while driving back to town, my father and I almost hit a disheveled woman who emerged from the woods. She was never seen again, and we often wonder about her story. Another encounter involved my brother and his friend while deer hunting. They saw something in a tree that jumped down unharmed from a great height. Covered in thick hair, it chased them until they finally escaped. Lastly, my aunt and uncle lived in a high-rise retirement building by the interstate after foreclosure. They witnessed an elderly woman with Alzheimer's drown in a frozen pond near the building. Her spirit reportedly haunted the building, with my uncle seeing her apparition in their living room. Eventually, they moved again due to my uncle's declining health, and he passed away a year later. These are the stories from my friends and family, shared over the years in the deep, mysterious Appalachian Mountains of eastern Kentucky.